Riley here. And by the way, no one has answered my Instagram highlights question about why is Doghouse Riley named Doghouse Riley. There's a free session for you waiting if you can figure it out. What film noir is that a reference to, since it's Noir Week here in the Bay? And I think I have one more film noir to go and see tomorrow before the festival at Noir City is over. Anyway, one of my goals for the new year was to ship things faster and fail fast and publicly, so hence more live streams. This will probably end up as a blog post at some point. I'm just going to sort of talk it through to you right now, which is this question of, I was discussing with my therapist today, of why am I driven to be an educator? Some people ask me a good deal, what is the point of trying to make an impact on the future through advancing political economic efficacy, which, as you know, is my mission in life. And some of the things that came up as we were exploring this question were, I think, what I've always viewed as kind of like the human need to leave a mark on the world, which a lot of people fulfill through having children, right? We're trying to overcome mortality at some level, right? And I don't have kids, so I'm not doing that. I'm not doing the selfish genes thing. But I'm trying to have intellectual children, one of which is named Algorithm for a Kidnapping, my novel that I'm trying to sell. So hopefully that child gets out into the world. But also my educational projects are, you know, my kids are kind of like children, although much of the unpleasantness of actually parenting them, thank goodness. I just get to be an intellectual mentor and do the fun parts, which is great. So, I have a poster right here, so bear with the staple gun firing, but at least you'll get my little Wild West tricks there. Come on, Riley. Riley, come here. Yeah, so that's kind of, I think, fundamental to what motivates a lot of creators and educators to leave a mark on the world. But I think the other thing that came up as we were exploring this question today is my own education. I come from a long line of educators, and much of my life kind of resisted becoming an academic classroom teacher, although when I did it, I found I liked it for a long time, at least as long as it was a way of getting paid to learn, which is really why I do what I do. I like getting paid to learn. I'm a compulsive learner. And I think part of what eventually ruined me for mainstream education, why I didn't stay in the classroom past, I did like almost 10 years, 5 of which was crazy alternative schools, and the more crazy and alternatives, the happier I was. But I didn't last too long in the more traditional classroom because I think that my own crazy alternative education bringing kind of ruined me for that. And why did it ruin me for that? Like, what was it that was so great about not traditional school for me? I think it was really kind of like the forced balance and the forced utilizing of all my human faculties, as they used to be called, abilities, aspects of human capacity on a daily basis, right? So we're talking aesthetic, artistic, practical, hands-on, and intellectual, and social, emotional, right? I mean, all education pays lip service to these ideas, right? Holistic pedagogy and things, but mostly it's just lip service, because mostly traditional education system, legacy education system, is one-sidedly intellectual and not even very good at being intellectual, right? Kind of cookie cutter intellectual, trying to teach people how to follow an algorithm, follow a routine, follow a set of instructions to check the box and get the right answer, which is not actually intellectual. It's just sort of using your intellect like a computer instead of like a creative being that you are, which is ironic because it's not preparing you for a world where computers are very good at doing that sort of routine following instructions type of thinking. And you really need people with all of those creative aspects and social qualitative aspects, because that's the stuff that's hard to get AI to do. And everybody knows this. It's not controversial, right? Everyone will at least say that that's what education is trying to do. But it turns out that under late capitalism, it's pretty hard to get the resources to actually do it. Because it's expensive for one thing. It's not cheap, right? It's hard to automate these kinds of things. It's hard to reduce them to a recipe and scale it. Now, I do think that digital tools are pretty remarkable in terms of being able to scale more responsive ways of interacting and doing things. But the type of education that would really transform people and the world is not particularly scalable. It's quite expensive. It requires, real project-based learning, for instance, requires highly trained educators with a lot of links to the community. It's very specific, it's tailored to where you are and who you're working with. It's not easy to boil it down to a set of instructions and do it out of a box. So, yeah. And of course, I grew up with a certain amount of privilege in a system where you had a low teacher-student ratio and a certain amount of funding, a lot of unpaid labor too on the part of both the teachers in the Waldorf system, where there's a bit of a, I think, martyr complex, quite frankly, like you see in nonprofits where people do a lot of work that they're not really being paid for. And also parents do a lot of work, and overwhelmingly women, right? Upper middle class women who are able to work from home, or right, there's a gendered, unpaid care work aspect to that, which, not to throw shade on anyone's personal choices, being a stay-at-home mom or part-time or whatever. I've certainly benefited from my mom's choice to do that, but she was able to do that because of privilege in many ways. And of course, we would love to see a world where education is driven by maybe a more balanced pool of not necessarily care work, right? Balanced in a more by gender and by class, right? Because in a world that I would like to see, lots of things would be automated that are currently done by, bullshit jobs, as David Graeber would say. And people would have some kind of guaranteed basic income, and everyone would have more time to help educate their kids and be part of project-based, community-embedded learning experiences. Education and care work are low-carbon work as well. So we'd also be paying a lot more people to do these things and training them a lot better. And just many points more of GDP would be going into that human capital investment. Anyway, I feel like I'm rambling now, but yeah, these are some of the things that motivate me to be an educator. I think that, to try to bring that world about in which so many more people have the opportunity to fulfill their human potential by having an impact on the world, learning a lot, getting to express all of their capacities. I think to get there, you need not just people like me who are raised in a kind of privileged alternative, we might say prefigurative setup. Staple gun. But we also need people who have the political economic literacy and efficacy to drive macro changes to policy, right? Because you can't do everything by dropping out and building alternatives and prefiguring the world that you want. This is where I diverge from many progressives who only want to see bottom-up changes and are very invested in this notion of prefigurative practice or politics. That's very strong, like in places rural Vermont where I grew up, sort of hippie graveyard, or here in California, right? There's a lot of people trying to live out alternatives, which is great and laudable. But sometimes that's to the exclusion or even the detriment, or people throw shade on maybe more top-down or macro ways of driving change. And I think that policy, and particularly economic policy, the tax system, is at the root of so many of education's problems, for instance, right? The inequitable way that it's financed. And if you don't build economic literacy and political economic efficacy, I don't think you're really doing all you could as an educator to drive change in the world, right? It's not enough to just learn about heroic bottom-up social movements, right? But realizing that really effective movements have a core of people who are not just marching and protesting these bottom-up sorts of things, but are deeply educated about policy and economics and applied civics, like how to actually build a campaign and execute it, right, politically, how to design a policy, how to run an organization. And I think that we maybe underemphasize some of those more technical or top-down aspects of social change that when, especially among progressives, education and in social movement. So that's part of why my contribution is focused on economics and focused on, these things aren't really all that technical, right? Having a good understanding of fundamentals of economic policy, it's really within ordinary people's reach. You don't have to be a technical expert, and leaving it to the experts is part of the reason why we have inequitable outcomes and policies. So democratizing that sort of technical knowledge so that people aren't scared of it, and they can meaningfully participate in democratic decision making. Regarding anything from interest rates to carbon prices, or for scientific literacy as well as economic, right? Sort of STEM, science, technology, technical topics in general, and I include coding in this. Actually, it's important in a digital world that we have people who actually understand, how digital systems are made, algorithmic government, things like that. Technical aspects are important, I think, for the particularly progressive educators and studies educators who might be more, want to see a kind of a different world like I do, right? I think it's important for us to take these things more seriously. Not be stuck in this kind of alternative nest where, we're good at gardening and making art, these kinds of things that feel good and maybe would play a big role in a different world that we want to see. But I think we need to tie together, those visions and that idealism with a bit more attention to the technical aspects. Very interesting. You know, I'm a boring sort of a guy, right? I find boring things interesting. And I think, you know, we're taught to think that technical things are boring. And that's almost part of maybe the cultural hegemony of an inegalitarian political economy, right? Where a small group of technocrats runs these things and knowledge isn't very widely shared, and people are sort of almost, you know, tacitly encouraged to see it as beyond them or as boring, right? And I think part of a progressive educator's job is to shift that cultural narrative and, you know, show all sorts of people that these things are not beyond them and they're not all that boring, and you know, you should educate yourself about them and feel that you can participate. That's very important to having a robust democracy in a highly technical and complex world that we live in. Okay, that's all for today, and I hope this was interesting to some of you, and I will see you on the flip side.